Jen here, and I have a 2-page layout for you guys today for the Off the Board series. It's also using all Wild Whisper products, so as part of my design team layout for today, and it's also Stretch the Sketch today. So I'm combining a whole bunch of stuff together to create this really fun 2-page layout, just documenting some of our hikes that we went on, or I guess this is one particular hike that we went on. The sketch that you saw at the very beginning it's got 3 pictures in it, so I thought this was a good opportunity to do lots of photos, stretch it all out into 2 pages, and use a bunch of Wild Whisper adventure collections. So they've actually put this collection out. They have adventure and then more adventures, and then they have like a re-release of adventure. So each one is slightly different. They all have the same kind of imagery and feel to them, but each one is slightly different with some new little quotes and things like that. And they work really well together, but also I kind of like that this newest release is leaning a little more towards the greens, which is my favorite color. So it's got some like brighter pops of green and stuff like that. So I love them all. They're all great. They're all great collections, and I love using them, and so I was really excited to use them all up. I'm also throwing in a few pieces from the masculine collection just because it has the same sort of colors running through it, but they're all just slightly darker. So it, like this piece right here, it kind of gave me some of those darker shades to start building up my layers. And so that's really what I took from the sketch, is just lots of layers and at least 3 pictures. I'm actually going to get 10 pictures on these 2 pages. So that's awesome. I always love when I'm able to do that. I definitely struggle with the multi-photo layouts, but for some reason, it just seems to make sense to me when I do them as 2 pages. There just seems to be so much more room to go ahead and put lots of photos and also get lots of embellishments. So you can see here what I've sort of been doing is I pulled out a bunch of scraps. Not all of these papers are from the adventure collection, but most of them are. Some of them are from Lake Life, Masculine I already mentioned. This one I think is actually from Strong and Free. It's the center of the paper, so I don't actually have the manufacturer's strip anymore. That is kind of the story with a lot of my Wild Whisper stuff. The older papers that I'm using, I have used up all the manufacturer strips, and I really only have bits and pieces of them left over. So I like to kind of combine them all together and see what I can come up with. I'm also using the Tinbit Travels collection for one piece to kind of get the mountains in there and a couple of embellishments. That is the collection that Nicole Wright designed. So really the moral of this story is Wild Whisper collections, they work really well together, and keep all of those scraps, because as you start to accumulate them, you'll notice that a lot of them work well to create new layouts, so you can really stretch all of those collections. So this piece here is from Masculine, and instead of trying to cut it into straight lines or, try to make everything really even, I decided to try to follow the lines and cut a few chunks of it out so that I could use the actual shape of the mountains and pop that in somewhere more as an embellishment than a layer of paper. So you just kind of have to wing it. I just sort of looked for peaks that I thought might make the good sort of top of the mountains, and then I found the right line to follow, and then I just cut them out. So I think I cut out 3. I only used 2, but I do have a chunk left over, and I can use that 3rd piece somewhere as well. So it was kind of an interesting, fun thing. I've seen some pretty creative ways of using this paper. I love this paper, so I'm glad that I got to use a couple pieces up, and it just kind of added to the fact that we're hiking in the mountains in Kananaskis. So I cut all of my layers. Basically, I took those scraps of paper, I squared off any edges, because a lot of times you guys know I don't measure or use my paper trimmer, so I just squared off the edges and cut them all in half. So I have two pieces that are about the same size to go on each side. So really my two sides are going to mirror each other, with a few little subtle differences just to give a bit of interest. I feel like there are some people out there who do so well. They measure everything and they can really make almost a perfect mirrored image on their layouts. I'm not generally one of those people. So for me, I like to add just subtle differences. For example, this picture that I just put down, it's actually a little bit smaller than the 4x6 picture that I'm going to put on the other side. Just the way that my camera took that picture and the way that the selfie printed it out, it's a little bit different. So I'm just going to add those little subtle differences. I think it makes it look very purposeful when you add enough of them. You just sort of, off center a few things or adjust a few things. And then that way it kind of hides the fact that I'm not measuring and making everything super, super perfect. By all means, if that is what you like to do, I love that as well. So go for it. I just find that I don't always have the patience for it. So I just roughly kind of took all of my layers there, put them all together to give myself an idea of what I wanted to do. And now I'm going to go ahead and stick everything down. I did have, when I was going through my Wild Whisper papers, I found that beautiful dark navy blue cardstock. I love that color and I must have had an idea for it. It isn't a Wild Whisper cardstock. I just had it in with these papers specifically, actually. So I decided to pull that out and use it as well and kind of put it 6 inches on one side, 6 inches on the other. And it just helps to tie the layouts together because I don't have very much that's going across the two sides. I will put the mountains that I cut out from Timbit Travels across the two sides as well. But that navy blue paper really kind of brings everything together and makes sure that when you're flipping through my album, you definitely recognize that these are two pages that actually read as one. So once I have my layers, most of my layers down in there, I kind of keep going back and putting my pictures down and then putting another layer. I just want to make sure you can actually see all of the little patterns on the papers, but also that my pictures aren't getting too squished. And I tried to keep the general feel of the sketch with my photos, so I do have that larger picture off center just a little bit and then room for the two smaller pictures beside it. But because I actually printed out more pictures than what's in the sketch, I wanted to be able to fit them all in. So I added a third one kind of on top of my two little ones. And then my last little 2x3 I put on the other side of the larger picture. And so really for me, when I'm looking at a sketch, I don't often print the pictures out in the exact sizes that I see on that sketch. Usually I'm using pictures that are already printed. So I've probably printed them either as a 4x6 or 4x3s or 2x3s. So you kind of have to just change things up in a way that works with what you have. So that's what I decided to do. And I think it works really good because, again, it gives something that kind of goes right across the two pages and links them together and kind of helps you to read this as a 2-page layout instead of two separate layouts. So I'll just go ahead and now replicate everything on the other side. And this is another situation where you'll notice I'm just using the other layout. It's right up above me, so you can't really see it, but every once in a while I kind of touch it, or I'll bring it down to reference it a little bit closer. But I really don't measure. I've never kind of been that person. A lot of times it's just because I'm doing this in actual little bursts of only, 10 or 15 minutes. So to sit down and measure and then have to get up to go help one of the kids or do something for the baby, then I come back and have to try to remeasure. It's too much for me sometimes. So actually most times it's too much. So it's just easier for me to sort of reference it. And so when I'm doing that, I like to make everything just a little bit off and then it looks more purposeful. So here's an example where I just brought that second page down to kind of give myself a general reference of where these two little pictures went, and make sure that they're kind of all fairly even across the two pages. And as I'm going, if I notice, so here I notice that this picture isn't fitting the same way it did on that page. So I'll take the first page I did, use it as a bit of a reference, adjust my layers a little bit, and then I can put everything back down. But I usually don't get my ruler out. If anything, I'll use my grid mat that I have in behind there, and it just is what works best for me. It's my kind of no stress approach, but definitely if you wanted to pull out your ruler, you could make this really clean and everything measured and everything looking exactly mirrored, and that would also look really stunning. So here is the mountain range that I cut off of one of the 12 by 12 pages from Timbit Travels. It was down at the bottom of the page, and then the whole top of the page is just plain white. So definitely a fun page that you could do a lot with. But I wanted to bring some mountains into my layout because obviously we've gone hiking in the mountains. And then that little triangle is from another Timbit Travels piece, and it just says, I think that one says life is better outside, and that whole collection is a camping collection, and it has the kind of retro cool camper imagery and stuff like that, and campfires and things, but it has a lot of mountain references just because Nicole is also from Alberta, and so we do a lot of camping in the mountains. So this is the other piece that I cut out that says the mountains are calling, and so you can see that same image of the mountains down below. And then here's where I thought I would pull in these pieces that I cut. So I'm just going to kind of tuck them in to the top here and create even more mountains, because obviously the Rocky Mountains, we've got lots of different layers and depth to them, and so this was kind of a fun way to just bring that in and create some imagery that kind of has some depth to it. And now it's the next day because my battery died, but all I added was a couple pieces of ephemera from Wild Whisper. I added that Adventure Awaits at the top, and on the other side is a little die cut that says Adventure Therapy, and then down in the left hand corner, right where the D's are on the thicker sheet, I added a couple of labels and a little bear, and I also added some branding strips. Wild Whisper has the best branding strips ever, so save them up because I've created so many layouts just using those. And I also added the little words that say Run Wild. And on the other side, I added a larger bear that actually has a forest kind of image inside the bear. So you'll see that in the close-ups. And I was trying to decide how to put my title or what kind of thickers to use for my title. I didn't know if I wanted to go darker or maybe use light, like a white thicker, but I remembered that I had these Dear Lizzie thickers in my How to Kill a Kit with Style kit, which is sitting right beside me. So they have sort of a coppery rose gold color to them, and I think they work so beautifully with the blues and the greens, and they have sort of an earthy or natural kind of feel to them. So that's what I went ahead and used and just created my title, Cat Creek Falls, which is where we were hiking that day. And then I did a little bit of stamping with the Adventure stamp set, and that's it. That's my layout for today. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please remember that you can use my discount code DTGen for your next purchase at the Wild Whisper store. You can get 10% off. I love saving money. And check out all the links below to everybody else who's playing along today with Off the Board and Stretch the Sketch. Until tomorrow, happy scrapping. Bye.